Hello and welcome to another episode of the djproject Criterion Collection. And here we're going to talk about Spine 591, 12 Angry Men, directed by Sidney Lumet, 1957. This is becoming for lack of a better word, a trend in Criterion where a lot of, and I think I'm saying this is because I've followed the company for many years. I know some have followed it longer than others, but anyways, I've noticed there's this trend of there are a lot more there are a lot more contemporary films coming out, like in the more recent years, and then in the last decade, and also more into the 90s. And the other is that there's starting to be more recognizable titles in various ways, and especially in American cinema. So you have like 12 Angry Men, you have Anatomy of a Murder, you have On the Waterfront. One of the forthcoming releases that's going to be in May, I think, is 3:10 to Yuma. You have Stagecoach, you have, all these highlights. They also did a box set of the BBS, which includes Easy Rider. Also includes Head, which I actually have seen. But anyways, so you start getting more and more of these recognizable titles. No, this does not mean that The Godfather or Star Wars or E.T. or Gone with the Wind or Casablanca is going to be on there. Although with Badlands coming out, you kind of wonder, are there some other Warner Brothers titles that are going to be on there? Yeah, it's all who owns what and what they're able to get. But there's starting to be more recognizable titles, and maybe it's just because I don't know what exactly they were able to do it. But so in a way, it's good for me because while I definitely like going outside of my shores to go to new lands as possible, it's also nice to kind of go back home and see what's within your own neighborhood, so to speak, that is worth looking at. And 12 Angry Men is one of them. 12 Angry Men is one of those films, and there are several films that do this, but when I watch it, I look at it and I go, you know what? They don't really make films like that anymore. First off, this is an example of a feature film that was based on a live teleplay. I mentioned this before when I talked about the golden age of television, how you had Marty and No Time for Sergeants and Requiem for a Heavyweight and Days of Wine and Roses. They were all teleplays, and then they would eventually become feature films. Well, 12 Angry Men is another example of this. This was a teleplay written by Reginald Rose, and the teleplay was directed by Franklin Schaffner, and then the feature film was directed by Sidney Lumet, and this was actually his first feature. And interestingly, Sidney Lumet also got his start working with live television, so it was a very easy crossover. And this was the first and only film to be produced by Henry Fonda, who also starred in it. But anyways, the story itself is deceptively simple. It's a jury who just sat through a very long and intense trial of an immigrant from Puerto Rico who was charged for murdering his father. And it was a very charged trial, as you can imagine, and very emotional, very very sweeping and such. And so it's these 12 guys that decide what his fate was. Now they go into it thinking, oh, this is very easy. The prosecuting laid out the evidence very well. He's clearly guilty. Let's just decide this really quickly, and then we can all go on to our lives. And I got this great baseball game to go to. I gotta do this and everything. And all it took was one guy to say, I'm not really so sure about this. And it's not because he has any kind of sympathy. I'm sure that's probably part of it, but it's in large part because he's being a sincere juror. He has some doubts about the evidence presented, and so it's an opportunity for him and everybody else, and then consequently the audience, to go through what was presented in the trial, the evidence, and how does it add up. And it turns out that it doesn't. And you also find out of, and this was the point of 12 Angry Men, both in its original in its initial teleplay form, and then in its feature film form, is it's the basis upon which we judge. It's what are the foundations, and it's evident that several of the jurors have their own biases, their own prejudices, their own notions of what is right, what is wrong, and or not so much of that, but just it's their own filters come through, and that is, and that plays a role in our justice system. Sadly, often for the worst. One of the things that actually constantly irritates me is that we live in a nation. I guess I should say I, because I'm only speaking for myself. But I live in a nation where, allegedly, or on various papers, the big one being the U.S. Constitution, is that there is a presumption of innocence until I'm proven guilty. I have a right of due process of law, meaning that if I am charged of violating a law, I should, one, I am presumed innocent until I'm proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's the key phrase here, beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's what this one juror has. He has reasonable doubt to declare him guilty, and he just wants to work it out. So there's a presumption of innocence, and that I'm entitled to due process of law. That I'm brought before a court. I have some kind of defense who speaks on my behalf in the court. I'm tried, obviously depending on the crime, but hopefully I'll be tried by a jury of my peers who would listen to it, an impartial jury of my peers who listens to the the arguments presented by both sides, and they go in and they deliberate, and then they decide guilty or not guilty. But it's that presumption of innocence that it's very easy to forget. This especially comes through in high-profile cases where it gets a lot of media attention, whether it's a national sensation or even a local sensation. There's that everybody judges and everybody assumes guilt, whereas technically and legally, it's presumed innocent until proven guilty. Even if there is no, without a shadow of a doubt, that he's guilty, it still operates on that. The burden of proof is more on the prosecution, and likewise the defense. I mean, the burden of proof is on both sides in the end, both the prosecution and the defense. So it makes a much needed commentary that's still very relevant. That's why I feel like it's one of those films where they don't really make films like that anymore. And that's one of the reasons is that it's a poignant social commentary that also does not get in the way of the realism. I mean, as I talked about before with Three Colors, you have an idea, but it's played out on a very human level. And you have the same thing here too. You do feel the points being made, But at the same time, you also think about it, you know, I know somebody like that. I know somebody who gets impatient when he realizes that he's not going to, you know, he's not going to leave right away, that there's going to be several hours devoted to deliberating, and I'm going to miss my plans, or I'm going to be stuck here and all that. It's, you know people like that. You know people who have a certain racist tint in their deliberation, in their justifications, and in their reasoning, and it's, you know, it's all played out. And this is why I really say that they don't make films like that anymore. It's all single setting. The drama, the story, all of it plays out in a single room, in a single day. There's no, you know, no change, and that's it. It's a self-contained ensemble drama that you don't really see that much. Now, granted, there's only so many of those compelling dramas you can do in that setting. It is a limited it is a limited situation, but it's pulled off, and it's that combination of the writing, the directing, the performances, and also the photography. This is another film that was shot by Boris Kaufman, who was related to Zizika Vertov, and who also worked with Jean Vigo in all of his films, and then came to the United States and would work. We would work on this. He would also shoot. Actually, before this, he would shoot On the Waterfront, and he won. I believe he won the Academy. I think he won the Academy Award. At the very least, I'm sure at the very least he was nominated, but I think he won Best Cinematography. So, it's well shot, well performed, well directed, well written, and it's just a very compelling drama that has a social point that also doesn't feel like it's preaching. It's that's the other thing. Like I'm not, and I'm sure most people are like this. I don't like preachy films. I don't like films that feel like they have to make a point and belabor it. It's just it's done it's played out in a very genuine, and certainly, I mean, it's dramatic, of course, but it's played in a more realistic manner. There are battles, but it's more subtle, and the battles are played out, reasonably played out, and realistically played out, and realistically earned and won. It doesn't feel like it's a contrivance. I mean, ultimately, all films are a contrivance. It's an artificial construction. We may think it's real, but ultimately it isn't. But what makes a film real is when you don't notice the contrivances. It's when it's a combination of the writing, the directing, the performances, the way it's shot, the way it's edited. It draws you into that particular world, or that particular setting, or that particular drama or conflict or situation, and you feel like you are a part of it in a albeit in an observer way, and sometimes even in a complicit way, but where you can be implicated on certain things, but nonetheless you are taken in, and you then see it for what it is, and then by the end of it, again, this is what makes the best art, is that by the end of it you learn something maybe about yourself or the world around you, and you then start to ask, okay, do I want to keep this going, or do I want to do something about it? And that's another reason why I feel like they don't make films like that anymore. Yes, there are exceptions. Yes, there are plenty of films out there that still do those things and still, have compelling performances, have genuine stories, have points to be made that are worth noting and worth saying and stating and proclaiming. I know they're out there. It's not a complete barren wasteland. Having said that, it still feels like it's a complete barren wasteland. I mean, for every film that comes out, like take 2012, for every film that's like Amour or Moonrise Kingdom, there were 25 to 50 films that are more like Jack and Jill and What to Expect When You're Expecting and just that. And it's now I believe that's always been there. There was never really a. You can talk about a golden age, but really there wasn't. I mean, like Casablanca. For every Casablanca, there were 40 or 50 films that are, unless you go out of your way to see what films were made in 1941 by looking at Wikipedia or IMDb, you're not going to know most of that. And and if you were to actually watch all of them, you probably wouldn't care about 90% of them. Again, Sturgeon's Law. So I know that that's always been there, but I guess maybe the reason why I lamented I lamented personally is that cinema as an art form has been around for over a century. And there's been plenty of films that have done some great things in different ways. And you feel like, you get this feeling that, there can be more. We can, there's, it feels like these are just tips of the iceberg. That you can do more with certain things. You can build on it. And I feel that nowadays we don't really do that. We don't really feel compelled to do that. And we're just content with just the same old. And it's a shame. And now that's if I want to be completely pessimistic. There is some hope from this. Again, there are films out there that do some great things. There are filmmakers that are working to make those kinds of films that when they come out now, they would be talked about in a few years or a few decades. The same way that I end up talking about 12 Angry Men or The Three Colors or any other films that have come before. So the point of all this is that this is really kind of the bottom line as to why I explore films, and particularly films that have been put out by the Criterion Collection, is that I want to know what is possible in cinema. And if I see something good, I will champion it, and I'll say, this is what I'm talking about. That's what I mean by a good performance, or this is what I mean by good writing, or this is what I mean by good cinematography, or any of those aspects that go into a film. I want to know what those are. I want to see lots of good examples. I know there are plenty of bad examples, and I definitely see those as well, because you learn a lot from the bad examples as you do with the good. But nonetheless, that's what it should be about in the end. So I know it doesn't sound like I talk that much about 12 Angry Men, but it is a film that is, again, it's very simple in its construction, very simple in its story, but what makes it worthwhile is how the drama plays out. If you find the 3 reasons video for 12 Angry Men, the 3 reasons they give is, number 1, the beginning, number 2, the middle, and number 3, the end. And I agree with that. I agree with those reasons. Those are really good reasons to check it out. It's you see how that whole drama plays out, and in a way that should be that's also in an indirect way and not in an intentional way. But or in other words, this was not. I don't think this was purely intended by those involved, but in a way, it parallels what the best films can do. You go into the theater one way, and then you come out a little bit different. Hopefully, better and smarter. Unlike the eternal pessimist Theodore Adorno, who had famously said it that whenever I walk out of a cinema, I come out stupider than I was before I entered it. So this is where I'm much more hopeful about it, that cinema can make you less stupid. It all depends on what theater you go into, what you go see. I can say you can do that for 12 Angry Men. I can't say that for some other titles. I don't want to mention them because I don't want to make this more bleak or anything. So yeah. Again, goes without saying. I definitely recommend it, especially if you like drama. If you're somebody that loves good performances and compelling performances and much more of a theater affair, but all well done and all well played out. It's still cinematic, but it owes a lot to theater. Again, it was originally a teleplay, so it has those qualities. But if you like that in your films, it's definitely right up your alley. And but yeah, that was 12 Angry Men. And until next time, take care.